Hey everyone, if you're wondering why you've got me, Lee McKenzie, who is a little less Welsh, a little more feminine, although Steve Jones has a very feminine side, then it is because I am taking over the reins of W Series and Formula One this week. And to talk about it all is lovely Alex, who is not in Austin, like me, in case you wonder if this is my house with a big sort of safety sign on the door. Alex, where are you?
I'm in my bedroom, my second bedroom, which explains this slightly strange lamp I got randomly hanging from the wall, hotel style. Haven't got round to taking that down, so this became the office. Although the pandemic started nearly a couple of years ago, so really should have got round to that DIY. But that's what's going on there. So, no. But you are actually in Austin.
I'm in Austin. My hotel room is very odd in that it has a fridge freezer as large as I've ever seen, even in a working kitchen of a restaurant, which a full kitchen, but I don't have a kettle. So when you wake up, which you naturally do about 4 a.m. because of the 6-hour time difference, you're stumbling around and you're trying to boil water in a pot to make a coffee, and it's all gone a little bit dangerous, really, I think is how I would sum it up. But we have such a great weekend of motorsport ahead. I know that you would dearly love to be out here. I love this racetrack. I love this city. So to be able to come out here and have 2 W Series races, a big finale, and also a Formula One race, which is at such a crucial point of the championship, although I think maybe every race is going to be a crucial point of the championship, it feels really special, actually.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. If we start with Formula One first, you did a brilliant, if I may say so, interview with Christian Horner where he described the remaining races as all cup finals.
Yeah.
And it's definitely got that intense feeling, not much in the championship at all. Max retaking the lead, but it does feel like a shootout every single time. But then you layer on W Series as well. And that, just when you think it can't get any closer, they're dead level on points. I'm already making notes about who's won more races, who can win on Saturday, who can win on Sunday. That is so finely poised between Alice Power and Jamie Chadwick.
I think the other sort of spice coming into this is that this is a really interesting racetrack. You know, sometimes you get these new tracks that pop up in the calendar and everyone's like, oh, goodness me, not this one. There's no overtaking, or there's no this, there's no that. I think COTA, the Circuit of the Americas, provides everything. That run up to turn one, I think, what is it, an 11% gradient? There's a lot of runoff. There's a lot of potential for people to lose, particularly in qualifying, their track time because of track limits. We saw Max Verstappen actually losing a win here. I think it was 2017 because of that. So this is a racetrack which can provide an awful lot of drama.
It's got that fantastic, you mentioned the climb to turn one. You can take different lines into turn one. So the opening corner here is always very precarious. So I'm thinking not only for Formula One, but for W Series as well. You can send a late move to the inside and put it all on the line and risk it. And there are so many parts of the racetrack where Herman Tilke had enough goes by this point, hadn't he? He basically stole the first sector from Silverstone and then decided that he was going to go for the classic 90-degree corners towards the end of the lap. It's got a bit of everything. Everyone's talking about bumps. When they had the MotoGP race a couple of weeks ago, the riders were calling it flat out dangerous. So if they're complaining, expect to hear quite a lot of whinging across the course of the weekend.
Well, I remember in 2019, I think Lewis had only been in the car for one lap or something. And he actually said the same in free practice one. And then, as you say, the MotoGP riders really complained. It's getting resurfaced before 2022 MotoGP, but that doesn't really help us for this weekend. That will be really interesting, particularly in W Series, where the drivers always say there that it's really hard to follow a car in front anyway. You add in the drama of a bump and your whole sort of aerodynamic flow is completely disturbed, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's gonna make the start crucial. It's gonna make qualifying crucial. Where do we think the balance of power lies going into this weekend? Because we saw Max take so many pole positions in a row, but then recently the predominant thinking is that Mercedes have got on top.
Yeah, and interestingly, I won't say who it was, but I was speaking to a couple of Red Bull guys on the flight yesterday, And I was just asking, I've known them for many, many years. And I was like, can you enjoy it? How are you guys? Are you so in the thick of it? And they were like, well, we're trying to enjoy it. He said, but Mercedes looks good just now. Now you get to this stage of the season. And for me, this is when it opened up. You were like, oh, USA, Mexico, these are tracks that Red Bull always had a fighting chance on.
Yeah.
And you would imagine more so this year. But I don't know. I find it very, very interesting. I mean, the last race was interesting because it was so all over the place. And yes, there were penalties, Valtteri won and all this kind of thing. But, Valtteri is another driver who's excellent round here. We've seen that before. Yeah. So I don't think it's a fait accompli. I think that's what's so interesting about it, that we just don't know.
And Valtteri and Checo, they're going to play such an important role because with the title battle swinging all the time, if you can make it a 10-point swing by getting your teammate in and getting a 1-2, rather than just a 7-point swing, that could decide things. Valtteri's the top scorer. Since he signed for Alfa Romeo, he's the top scorer in the World Championship, which is absolutely typical of the season we're having. And then it's Daniel Ricciardo, then it's Verstappen, then it's Hamilton. So it shows you how they're beginning to sort of mark each other off and give other drivers a chance. We did see Sergio return to the podium last week, and Red Bull desperately need him to be there because Valtteri's liberated by his move. He's driving brilliantly. Apparently still fancies playing the team game. Maybe a bonus at the end of the year might have something to do with that. But Sergio stepped forward as well.
Yeah, and I think just on this US Grand Prix, before we talk a little bit more about the title fight, I think that's another interesting thing. There's also McLaren's in the mix. Other teams that we've not even spoken about that have disrupted really since Italy onwards. There's been quite a lot of disruption. And I think that gives it there'll be a lot of, Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, these sorts of drivers coming in here thinking this is another great chance for us.
Yeah, absolutely. The longer the championship goes on and they have to start considering grid penalties, they have to start considering where each other is. Maybe you think that your car's fine on a one stop, but you can't take the risk of not covering off Hamilton on the strategy or vice versa. Then Ferrari, McLaren, as you say, maybe the door swings open for them again. The two Ferrari drivers, not separated by much in the championship. Have you been surprised by the season that Carlos Sainz has had?
Yeah, I have, because also I think there was quite a quiet period for him. And it was a bit like, oh no, not this Ferrari pressure, because he's such a great character, a live wire. He handles pressure. We know that. And Charles is a lovely guy, but can also be one of these drivers that just quietly, puts someone under the thumb. But I'm really pleased. I think he's starting to find his place there. I think they've been quite protective over him as well, which is important. And it's maybe something that we've not seen from Ferrari over the years. I think it's actually a really exciting combination going forward. And also because they push each other, and that should bring out the best in each other, which I know kind of is a bit of a sporting cliche, but it's absolutely true. You need to have somebody alongside you that can keep you honest and keep you true and keep you having to do your utmost best, because if you're getting beaten by your teammate, that is the first thing that we look at. When we talk about qualifying head-to-heads, and sometimes it make depressing reading, and you just think, actually, I probably won't mention that to the driver after the race or after qualifying. But these are how they measure themselves against the guy who's sitting in the car alongside them.
So that is the battle further down between the Ferrari drivers. If we look up the table, we've got Lando Norris and Sergio Pérez not separated by much at all, although Pérez seems pretty comfortable with sacrificing any points he might get in order to help Max's driver's title bid.
Yeah, and I think that is a very sensible way. I mean, they re-signed him for next year as well. Let's not forget, this time last year, he wasn't sure where he was going to be, if he was even going to be in Formula One. The fact that he can still drive at the level that he's driving, get podiums, which is, that used to be a great day in the life of Sergio Pérez and Sergio Pérez fans. To see Checo standing on a podium, it was like, wow, he's done, he's looked after his tires and he's such a good driver, and why does he not get these opportunities? Now he's been given the opportunity, he needs to take it. So we shouldn't be excited to see him back on the podium, because that needs to be a regular occurrence. But at the same time, I think he knows what he needs to do, and he's happy with that.
And then we get to this title battle, which continues in Austin. But I think a lot of people now, given that we've got just 6 races to go, have tallied off where they think is a Mercedes track and where they think is a Red Bull track. And it just adds this extra layer of pressure. So I think a lot of people expect this week to be a Hamilton track. As you've mentioned already, Valtteri Bottas has won this race before. He's denied Lewis at a track where he's very strong. Hamilton's taken 2 titles at this circuit in the past. Now, if Lewis doesn't win on Sunday, it almost becomes like that cliche, a 6-pointer in football, whereby if you can win at another one's basically home race, then suddenly you're taking so much momentum for the title battle. And all these dynamics are at play, whether the drivers like it or not.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I always, Max is also great here, as you mentioned. Red Bull have been here in the past. He had that win taken off him for track limits. But, I saw a stat earlier. I think it was actually on Channel 4's page, and I wrote it down. 2021 laps led by Max Verstappen this year, 469. 2021 laps by all other drivers, 465. Now, just on that, you would think, well, why is it tight in the championship? Why is it as tight as it is? And I think that this weekend, as you say, because if we head into Mexico, what do you think? Mexico is a Red Bull track, a Max Verstappen track? Absolutely. And then there's two tracks still to come where, yes, you can look at layout, but in actual fact, we've not been to Qatar, we've not been to Saudi Arabia, so there must be slight question marks over them as well. I'm buzzing for this weekend. I'm really excited about it. I think there's still a lot to go in the mix here.
So that's Formula One, edge of the seat stuff. W Series, edge of the seat stuff. What a finale we have for W Series. Level on points, 2 races to go. Couldn't be set up any better. 2
races to go here, because don't forget, we were meant to go to Mexico City for W Series, and that did not make sense financially. They couldn't get the freight there from the US just to do a standalone race in a few weeks' time. So they opted for a double header. Now, we had a double header in Austria, as it were, but that was a week apart. So for me, this is really interesting because the drivers, it cannot be wacky races out there from free practice 1. They need to look after their car. They have 2 practice sessions, 1 qualifying session, and 2 races. And if these cars get damaged, it's not like Formula One. They're not blessed with loads of different parts. They can't be flying parts over from the UK overnight and things like that. So, you need to look after your car for race 1. But also, really interestingly, I think that the qualifying is going to be so interesting because they're using 1 qualifying session for both races. And this is where my theory on track limit comes into play, because not every driver in W Series has a vast amount of experience, and sometimes it is a matter of getting 1 banker lap in that where they've not exceeded track limits, but they need to have 2, because the fastest lap, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is for race 1, and their second fastest lap is for race 2. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, which is a strange old format, and it's going to be terrific fun calling that qualifying session. Because
oh my goodness,
I'm just going to have a piece of paper everywhere. But as you point out, 2 consistently fast laps at the front. It shouldn't scramble the grid, but it could lead. When I've seen this format used in the past, there is always someone who loses out as a result. There's always someone who would have been second who ends up 9th. It always has a lottery effect on the grid. In
actual fact, we've got 3 drivers who mathematically could win this. So there's Alice Powell, British, Jamie Chadwick, British, Emma Kymäläinen, Finnish. It would have to go disastrously wrong for the other 2 Brits, for Emma to get her hands on a trophy. But, it could be won on Saturday if Jamie doesn't score points and Alice wins. But it's, again, an interesting dynamic because there is a lot on the line for these drivers. Let's not forget, it's not just money that will further their careers, and they go off and race in other series, and they will compete against guys. I think that's very important to say. But also there's super license points, and that will be what gets them a test in an F1 car, or get sports cars and things like that, puts them on. Not everybody wants to be a Formula One driver. You know, I think it's also worth saying that. But the money that you win, the prestige that you get from being a W Series champion, and the super license points and everything that goes with it, I think is a really tasty package. If there needs any extra incentive to go off and win this championship, which I really don't think there is.
What a weekend we have in store in Austin. And just one final thing to say then, the 2022 calendar has been announced. 23 weekends on this. It is the largest ever Formula One calendar. It's going to see the return to some of our favorite venues as well. Singapore is returning. That is going to be fantastic to see. Japan as well. But what a long championship it's going to be to take the title. The strain it's going to put on everyone. It's an amazing job, but it's an amazing job 23 weeks of the year now, plus all the other factory time, all the testing that goes in. It's going to be intense.
I mean, you say it's going to be long. It is long, but at the same time, it's also very condensed, because it finishes a lot earlier, I think about a month earlier or 3 weeks earlier than this year, with less races, and last year with a lot less races. I'm intrigued. I mean, I know there's always this discussion, there's a big turnover of staff in Formula One. 23 races in such a short period of time is tough. And, you know, you don't have, like they used to have, you know, when my father was going off to Formula One and I was a kid at school, it started at the Easter holidays, it finished by the October holidays. And that's how I would mark it in my head. It's like, you know, as a school pupil. But they had test teams, and they cut test teams because they wanted to cut back on the money that the teams were spending. So do you need different personnel? Do you need to have more personnel? Because where does that fit into the grand picture of, you know, of budget cuts and everything like that? Because as you quite rightly say, the pressure it puts on the team is huge. I always think, rightly or wrongly, but at the end of a triple header, that you start to see little mistakes. It could be in pit stops, it could be elsewhere. These guys are like machines, but they are also humans. And even at the end of a triple header, they are exhausted. When you look at this calendar, it is brutal. And there will be people watching this going, stop going on about this. This is an incredible job. Everybody would love to have this job. And I hear that. I absolutely get that. But at the same time, it will be exhausting for the guys in the teams who come back and, as you say, have to go straight into the factory and work constantly. And it's a lot of time away from family. Yeah,
the balance, the work-life balance is tough enough in Formula One without chucking in all these races. It's a strange one, isn't it? Because I think from a fan's point of view, you want as much as possible. I'm just really intrigued, Lee, to see where the upper limit is. Because I remember the upper limit used to be 21. Once upon a time. Oh, they'd never go beyond 21. If there are spare weekends now, I'm wondering, Formula One has to keep growing. You've got to keep the stakeholders happy. If there are spare weekends, I think we could go much, much further than 23 in the future.
Well, we will be full NASCAR.
Yeah, every single weekend.
Just every single weekend.
We would need A and B teams, wouldn't we? We would need A and B teams.
We would need A and B teams. And since I'm the only one sitting out here in Austin, I'm figuring the B team has been deployed.
Nonsense. Have you seen the size of your fridge? Steve Jones doesn't get that.
He doesn't get a fridge. He has a very small fridge packed with champagne. I have a very large fridge, which is just empty. There we go.
We're not going to improve on that ending. That'll do.
Alex, it's been a pleasure. I will no doubt speak to you on camera over the weekend.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Lee.